History is nothing but a history of movements. Every piece of history has been about some disenfranchised group having demands and has fought, died, been tortured, locked up, everything under the sun until they've gotten them.
So the working group on labor and community partnerships came about essentially because those of us who were funders committed to supporting economic and social justice work saw that there was a need to really organize other funders to understand the potential power of building and supporting labor community coalitions at the grassroots level.
The folks who founded the working group felt there was a real need for a place where people could talk about the importance of unions to working people in this country.
So we embarked really on a kind of deep learning ourselves and listening to people in the field, people who are doing actual organizing.
And it was a time where there were great changes in the labor movement, and there was an increased attention to people of color, workers of color, poverty in general. And I felt like we would all be so much more better off, so much stronger if we worked together.
It filled a void in terms of creating a space within philanthropy that can be siloing and isolating to bring folks together. I mean, I think even the initial name that had partnerships in it, I think has been something that the working group has tried to embody.
Okay, here's a group that wants to educate funders about unions and also educate unions about philanthropy. So that seemed to be a really good place to be.
It's not by coincidence that one of the most pressing issues we face is inequality, because as we've seen a decline in traditional labor, we've seen a decline in wages, a decline in workers' assets. And NFG has helped invest in new forms of worker organizing that I think have inspired people across the country, have organized populations that previously were unorganized, and also served as an example for the traditional labor movement.
Some of the most exciting organizing developments that occurred throughout our tenure was, first of all, the growth of the whole living wage movement.
This Fight for 15 that's putting workers out front, that's leading with a very concrete demand that's about bread and butter issues that people cannot survive on, right, $7.25 an hour, that has workers really in motion and has incredibly diverse leadership. It's also winning.
It's really clear over the last 3.5 years there's been this sea change in how people are thinking about inequality, about the need to increase the minimum wage. I felt like it was much more about really changing the narrative around low-wage work, and I think they've obviously done that.
Even though it is an essential element of how we build worker power, restore power to workers, it's often hard to raise funding for organizing. The working group is very supportive.
The living wage movement just caught on fire, and I think really benefited from our joint organizing strategies, raising money together, but also publicizing the work and inviting funders in to learn about the campaigns that were going on all across the country.
One of the great accomplishments of the working group is it helped commission research on the importance of worker centers.
The conditions for working people are not getting any better, they're getting worse. Wages are not just stagnant, they've regressed. And that's the importance also of emergence of the worker center, because workers have found other ways to fight their battles.
There's closer relationships now between organized labor, the labor movement, and primarily immigrant worker centers all over the country.
Organizers and workers realized there had to be some way for workers to have a voice, to be able to organize themselves in the workplace and to stand up for their rights.
The working group was very supportive at the start of the worker center movement, and I think we've seen the proliferation of these organizations all across the country.
I think one of the strengths of the working group has been site visits.
And I think the best attended site visit was to Las Vegas. We kind of saw the innards of a major hotel. The point of it was to show what a union of primarily immigrant workers can do to create a middle class. I think it was very eye-opening for a lot of people.
We also did a trip to Nebraska, where we focused on the organizing being done there within the meatpacking industry. A site visit organized to Southern California.
There's
100,000 warehouse workers out there, and we met with many of them. We heard about the appalling conditions out there. There's no heating and there's no cooling in the summer. It's extremely hot inside those warehouses. There's no health and safety training and concerns.
The learning tour in Hawaii was like, it meant everything personally and professionally. If we can figure out, even in our own local spaces, how we can do something different, how we can barter, or even do the extra work of just like seeing someone beyond a service they're providing. I got all of that from that tour, and it was great.
And then there were other things like, I don't think before the working group any foundation ever had a policy of holding their meetings in union hotels or staying in union hotels when they traveled. Just simple things like that that people began to think about and adopt policies.
You know, the working group is still the only home for funders who are dedicated to workers' rights and labor and making jobs better.
If labor and philanthropy don't have ways to connect and strategize together, it's a real disservice to the field.
As our field was growing, the time seemed right to start to create a special space where we could come together and really look at the way laws and policies are changing to hinder progress and the way organizations are fighting for working people to actually make progress, to win paid sick days, to raise the wage, to make it possible for workers to fight back against wage theft or unsafe conditions.
Labor and funders and community folks can come together, create spaces where these groups can talk to one another and create projects that come out of that.
People are intensely curious about work that they don't do and that they don't understand, and so it's a way to pull back the curtain on our economy and on the ways in which things appear.
You know, I think as we are seeing in this election, economic issues are definitely in the forefront, and a concern about where jobs are going to come from, how people are going to make a decent living, what trade signifies for working people and middle-class people and poor people. All of that is being looked at in philanthropy, whether it's through funding research or funding activism.
Those of us who are privileged to sort of have these professional, office-y, upper middle class jobs don't always get to talk with the people who produce or transport or make possible the rest of our existence. And so it's a really great, incredible opportunity.
All too often, their contribution is invisible and people write them off, right? And the truth is, they're providing incredible value to our economy. They're making other people's lives possible. They are doing hard work that needs to be done, and they deserve to be compensated fairly and to be treated with respect and dignity. And it is possible to win that.
As individual funders, some of us might have some access, some of us might not, but as a body of funders, we're a force.